see me soon. You know what?
Love that.
Before I get into some NBA stuff with you.
Because we haven't had a good precedent set, or at least an area of emphasis to make sure, like in these match contact above the shoulders, absolutely. But it was kind of like a snowball effect. This feels like it's a little bit tough because in our conversations stick, and our conversations are.
And a rising tide lifts all boats. And just like folks in the NBA rode that Magic Johnson, Larry Bird wave, and then they also that you have a lot of people believing
Gender that I am, or is it just analysis?
It's a tattoo attached to. You can do that too. Of course, you're objective, but you also are very.
Stephen A. Smith opens this conversation the only way you can right now, bringing up the fist to Caitlin Clark's throat and the suspension that followed, and asking his guest point blank whether the punishment was actually appropriate. That's the right question to lead with, because everything else in this conversation about resentment and targeting only makes sense once you're anchored back to the actual incident that kicked all of it off.
After the WNBA, she got a lot of this same type of treatment, physicality, toughness, because a lot of players look at her and they're like, you know what? They say that you are going to, bring some energy. Like, I'm competitive enough to want to challenge you. Things were not easy for Skylar. And I say this because I know Skylar like a sister. There are many instances. My big mentor is Lisa Leslie. Lisa Leslie took a lot of smoke, and she also dished it back as well. Right? And I think like every player that takes smoke has the right to dish it back into.
And Shiny Ogwumike doesn't dodge it. She says flat out that any contact above the head or to the neck area is out of bounds, full stop, not okay, no matter how normal falling to the ground looks in the flow of a basketball game. I think that's the most important soundbite in this entire segment, because you've got a respected ESPN analyst, someone who played and covers this league at the highest level, saying there's no gray area on the actual contact itself.
In our conversations stick. And our conversations are either doors opening or doors closing to missing, I guess, some of the magic of what we're experiencing. And so I hope, we live in a society where multiple things can be true, but at times it's difficult to communicate or to convey that,
Well, you might not have heard the show last week because you're a very, very busy woman and you're usually on TV when I'm on TV or radio or whatever. But I had to check a couple of callers that were calling and, talking about Andrea Carter more so than yourself. But I told them that y'all two are the best in the business. I love y'all dearly. Y'all are my sisters, and particularly with y'all and Monica Mc.
Where this gets more interesting is her point about officiating philosophy. She's saying the WNBA has been deliberately calling more fouls this season to protect shooters and increase freedom of movement, chasing the same evolution the NBA went through a decade or two ago to boost scoring and fan interest. That's a legitimate structural explanation for why this incident became such a big deal. Separate from any conversation about Clark specifically, more fouls called doesn't automatically mean more control of the game, and that's exactly the tension that blew up here.
To do something that it rarely does. And did the league have every right to do so when they see contact above the shoulders? Absolutely. But it was kind of like a snowball effect that I think, had greater implications because of the players involved, because of the narratives that were coming out. And so I think it's just tough because being an analyst, it's like these hot and button issues that the players, in some ways have moved on from because it's a long season. There are more games. I mean, I followed the next Indiana Fever game because my sister was playing against.
Right.
She says the league had every right to upgrade this to a flagrant and suspend Alyssa Thomas, but that it snowballed into something bigger because of who the players involved were and the narratives already swirling around them. That's an honest, uncomfortable acknowledgement. The exact same contact probably doesn't become a national story if it's two role players nobody's heard of.
Of course, you're objective, but you also are very adroit at providing a level of perspective that most, like, for example, if I'm debating you, there are times that you'll go the ladies route. And I'm like this, well, wait a minute, damn, I'm a lot of things, but I ain't a woman. You understand? I don't know what she knows about the ladies. So I got to listen to you in that perspective, and it's healthy. So I don't mind at all. But let me ask you this. I never asked you this before. You talked about that sisterhood.
Yeah.
What do you think is the difference between a sisterhood?
Then Stephen A. gets into it directly. He says there's some jealousy, not from everybody, not from most players, but real resentment toward Clark, from people who built this league for years and are now watching all the praise flow one direction. He compares it to Magic Johnson and Larry Bird riding the Michael Jordan wave instead of resenting it, and honestly, that's been Smith's exact message for weeks now. Rising tide lifts all boats, and if you fight that wave instead of riding it, you're the one who loses.
Forwards, all three of you do. And so when I took the position last year, when there was some Caitlin Clark issues, like, listen, there's some jealousy. It's not everybody, it's not most, but there's some resentment there. On one hand, I understood it because I said, hey, you know what? There's ladies that's been in this league for years that did everything they could to uplift and build the sport to this point, and then everybody wants to throw all the praise and all the acclaim in Caitlin Clark's direction. So that's going to build some resentment. But on the other hand,
Chinese response here is sharp. She points to the NBA draft, where every rookie says they're going to spend their career trying to prove why they deserve to go higher than the guy picked first. Trying to knock off the top dog is completely normal in sports. That's a fair, level-headed way to reframe some of this instead of jumping straight to conspiracy.
So that they can increase freedom of movement. They can protect shooters. Like, this is the evolution that the NBA had maybe a decade or two ago that the WNBA is going through now, because more points means more fans, and we want to make the fans happy, right? But even though we are having these imperatives, people, like, the game doesn't feel like it's in control. The WNBA is known consistently to be physical, but you have more fouls. But do those fouls mean that you are in control of the game? And I feel like in that instance, because we haven't had a good precedent set, or at least an area of.
But then she goes deeper. She brings up Skylar Diggins coming out of Notre Dame as the it girl of her era, getting the Drake cosign, the celebrity attention, and then getting hit with exactly this kind of physicality and toughness testing once she got to the league. 24 years of watching women's basketball up close, and she's saying this pattern isn't new, it's just that a lot of newer fans have never seen it play out before.
Absolutely, but it was kind of like a snowball effect that I think, had greater implications because of the players involved, because of the narratives that were coming out. And so I think, like, it's just tough because being an analyst, it's like these hot and button issues that the players, in some ways have moved on from, because it's a long season. There are more games. I mean, I followed the next Indiana Fever game because my sister was playing against,
right,
the Indiana Fever. Like, players move on because these things tend to happen in sports, and the league has every reason to adjudicate what they see fit. But it just feels like it's a little bit tough because.
She also makes a point that deserves way more attention than it's getting. Every player who takes smoke has the right to dish it back and defend herself, and it's not foreign to see someone in the top position get challenged consistently, forced to add muscle, build a supporting cast around her. That's not an excuse for a fist to the throat, but it is real context for how competitive, physical pushback against a rising star has always worked in this league.
Radio or whatever. But I had to check a couple of callers that were calling and, talking about Andrea Carter more so than yourself. But I told them that y'all two are the best in the business. I love y'all dearly. Y'all are my sisters. And particularly with y'all and Monica McNutt, no matter what my opinions may be, I'm deferential to y'all when it comes to the NBA. You watch WNBA. You watch it night in and night out. You played in the sport, former top draft pick in the sport. You've achieved big things in your career, and you know this sport backwards and forwards. All three of you do.
And this is where Stephen A. brings up something a lot of hosts won't say out loud. Traveling the country, he says most of the people who come up to him, bringing up what they're doing to that girl, are white, and there's a racial dynamic that a lot of fans genuinely believe is playing a role here, even though he's careful to say he's not claiming it's accurate, just that it's a real perception out there.
They endured to what Caitlin Clark is doing, knowing that there are people that are questioning that.
I think that because we are women competing, particularly playing basketball, there are different level of societal expectations of how we should compete. Meaning, when we go out there and compete, we're going to be competitive. Someone's that it girl. Like, if I'm playing against Asia Wilson, I'm going to try to show my best game and try to knock her down because I want to, that's the only way that you elevate your own, right? And so, I think there are these expectations of how we compete and how when the game is done that we carry that over. I'll tell you this, I was the first one.
He backs that up with the money angle. Under the league's new collective bargaining agreement, standard salaries are still capped nowhere close to what Clark reportedly pulls in, something like $16 million once you count her endorsements. A lot of fans believe that gap is a real source of resentment, and whether or not you buy the racial framing, the financial disparity conversation is at least grounded in something concrete.
Brand deals. Just because we compete this way doesn't mean we conduct ourselves behind closed or is a different way. You
Right.
know, I always tell people the WNBA is a sisterhood, right? Because for so long we've had to band together to get to where we need to go. Now the money is here and it's different, but I think the principles remain the same, Stephen A. So, but I'll lastly say this, Stephen A, based off of the narratives at times that people come to discover, do you think that, like, you know me?
Chiney pushes back on some of that with a really thoughtful point about societal double standards. Women competing at the highest level are held to a different expectation of how they're allowed to compete than men are, and she's honest that if she were guarding a Ja Wilson, she'd be trying to shut her down too, because that's literally how you elevate your own game. That's a much more nuanced take than just, it's jealousy, or it's racism. It's actually about what competitive respect looks like in women's sports specifically.
Before I get into some NBA stuff with you, obviously Caitlin Clark made a lot of news last week. You know, when she got a fist to the throat. We all know that. There was a suspension that took place and what have you. I want you to talk about that a little bit. When you saw that incident, went through your mind. Did you think the punishment was appropriate? Your thoughts, first of all.
Yeah. So in game flow of watching that game, I didn't notice much. You know, very similar to anybody watching.
And she closes this stretch by pointing back to the business case. She was in Clark's comments the day she dropped her signature shoe, hyping it up. Because a rising tide really does lift every player in this league, Angel Reese included, with her own fashion and clothing deals. That's the version of this conversation that actually matters going forward. Less, is she being targeted? More, is this league going to build around the attention she's bringing, or keep fighting it?
I should say this. The referees should be hyper vigilant to matchups, but also to games and to also players. And in that instance, when you see a team that just went, and I believe there were 5 technicals in the game that they matched up 2 days prior, they should have a hyper awareness to, like, hey, if there's something physical, we should be in control. And what we have noticed over the course of the WNBA season is that there's this imperative to call more fouls, because, you know, this is a part of the WNBA boom, right? Like, we're having the highest scoring WNBA season because they're calling fouls so that they can increase freedom of movement